We're recording. Woohoo! We're live. It's a miracle. We're running a little late today, but it is Wednesday, November 2nd. I hope you're voting early for the elections, but if you're not, I'll nudge you along. We have a great guest today. And before we get rolling, we're going to ask our own John Sibley Butler from some music.
I've been down this road before. I remember every tree, every single blade of grass was a special thing for me. And I remember every road and every hotel room and every song I ever sang on a guitar out of tune.
Well done, well done. What a chap, what a chap. Look at that bow tie. Look, bow tie.
Oh, yes, you know, I'm being influenced by my elders. They're having a great influence on me.
Sincerest form of flattery. Not play along.
Come closer to the microphone, Llewellyn.
Okay, I'm closer now, shouting, yes.
Brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
So Johnny, how are you today?
I'm doing fine. I think the world is revolving around a future financial, I wouldn't call it crisis, but an issue, whether it's getting enough fuel to warm Europe, given the war, whether we are concerned about our grid here in America. And so it's some very, very interesting times. On top of that, of course, we have the elections where everyone is saying they can, quote, solve all the problems and pointing out other kinds of things. But other than that, the entrepreneur spirit in America is alive and well. I am seeing more startups now than I've seen in a long, long time. These are startups that revolve around energy. It revolves around different kinds of technology for security. But more importantly, it revolved around solving the crisis that we have with business enterprises. So now we got the whole distributed workplace. And the question is, what would it look like? What do you do if you can hire anybody from around the globe if you allow your employees to stay home? So we are in changing times politically, but the entrepreneur spirit has always kept America together. And so we must depend on that spirit for great things. The stock market is up and down, as usual, and Americans seem to have a good sense about the future, except the political future. So things are interesting. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on politics and economics and trying to understand how the world is interrelated. If we look at what's happening now in China and what they're trying to do with their finances and their projections. So it's been good, but you know, that's why we're here to solve problems, not to complain about problems.
Got you. Thank you, Johnny. Llewellyn King, how are you, sir?
Very well. I'm sorry about the problems I had with the computer, but I'm going to ask an expert, who we're going to meet shortly, why consumer electronics are so baffling to those of us who have to use them. Johnny is talking about. We are facing profound changes in the world, and the spirit of entrepreneurism, while being absolutely essential and desirable and fabulous, is not going to address all of them. We have fundamental changes. We have changes from pure supply, like water, which is now in short supply in many parts of the country and may be worse off. We may be worse off in the future. Texas is one state where it doesn't look very good. And of course, most of the Western states. We're going to have a difficult winter in New England because we don't have enough pipelines bringing in natural gas. But to show how interconnected the world is, despite people who are saying there's no more interconnection or the connections are broken and there's no globalization, because of the lockdown in China over COVID, the price of oil fell 1%. That doesn't sound like a lot. But if the cause of it was a lockdown in China, not anything to do directly with the consumption, it shows both the fragility and the interrelatedness of everything in the globe we live in today. So a shortage in one place, a lack of water in another, an energy crisis somewhere else affects everyone. There is no hiding from it. It's as though the philosopher Hegel, as I understood it, saw the world as being in a way interconnected. If you did this here, push the balloon there would be something, a cause and effect everywhere. So we've got to watch that for the future. We're unclear where we're going, and how we're going to come out of it. I'm sure we will come out of it, but we will be a profoundly changed world when this particular cataclysm has run its course.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm just showing everybody that you can change your background live. It's one of the virtues of consumer electronic stuff. And we have a great,
but the sea is frozen. The sea has been frozen over. Isn't that amazing?
that is true. We have a great guest today. Steve, how are you, sir?
I'm well. Thanks for having me back on the roundtable. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while, and you know, things have sort of changed dramatically. And before we get rolling here, let me introduce you formally for those that don't know you. Steve Koenig is the VP of Research at Consumer Technology Association, and he's been here before, actually. I think June of 2021 or something like that. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while.
He's going to be with us today for about an hour. Steve directs all the aspects of CTA's consumer and business research, including the methodology and the design and the analysis and the marketing and analyst staff supervision, the budgets, etc. They contribute to the direction and execution of CTA's market data program in the US and global consumer technology forecasts. He serves as the primary industry analyst, and he obviously speaks all over the world. And we are looking forward to listening to him today and what's going on with the latest trends. He gave us some sneak peek of that. Prior to CTA, Steve was a consultant with ComScore, senior analyst at MPD, a senior editor at Computer Retail Week, one of my favorite old magazines that I don't read anymore for some reason, and a senior analyst at ARS. He has an MBA in marketing from North Texas University. All right, another Texas system company, and a BS from the University of Texas at Arlington, another great system related to the Longhorns somehow, even though on the football field they are nemesis. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks again for having me back on the roundtable. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, Steve. Remind us and tell the audience what does CTA do, and you know they may know or may not know that you are actually driving the most successful, exciting event in the planet every year in January. Tell us about it.
Well, thanks. Yeah. So Consumer Technology Association is the North American trade association for all consumer tech. And our membership constituency includes all the brands you're familiar with and a long tail of SMEs and startups, 100% tech. And we're probably best known as the owner and producer of CES, held each January in Las Vegas. This in just a couple months' time, we'll be there January 5th through 8th. That's that'll be the CES for 2023. And in addition to CES, research, my shop is another thing that distinguishes CTA in the trade association world. Not many trade associations have what we do, which is really a boutique mirror image of a for-profit research shop inside the walls of CTA. And in addition to the things that you mentioned, Andres, the other thing we do is we have a partnership with NASDAQ. And we partner with NASDAQ to develop thematic indexes that support ETFs on the global financial markets. So we have 1 foot on Wall Street, 1 foot in Silicon Valley. And that's quite a stretch, by the way. But in any case, we're very active there. So we're more and more, we're focused on the economy, not just innovation and championing technology innovation, but what's really happening in, of course, the US economy, but globally as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But
Go ahead,
Steve,
Johnny.
Steve, this is interesting. The research portion, which is all involved in tech, and you have one foot in Wall Street in NASDAQ, which, by the way, the NASDAQ guy that's running NASDAQ is a Longhorn from our law school.
Okay.
You know, as we look at the trends in tech, how do you see the longest trend? You know, we talk about technology and how it trends out. That is, you have early adopters, then it kind of go by the wayside, and then something else comes on, and it takes the place of that. You know, whether it was from, you know, the BlackBerry to the different kind of cell phone. Where we are now, I think with the cloud would be the same way. I think the cloud would generally decline. How do you measure the tail end and the upswell of what we call the Koenig tech curve? That is, how do you measure that with all of the data that we have now?
Well, sure, that's a great question. There are a lot of measuring sticks for tech adoption, investment, et cetera. And consequently, there are a lot of different curves and a lot of different shapes thereof. And you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, which kind of has this initial hump, and then it starts to go up again. That's one thing, and there are a lot of trends that you can pin on that donkey, if you like, tails you can pin on that donkey across. And one truism I think with tech trends generally is that the important ones, at least, tend to evolve over a long time series, and they evolve in over ostensibly decades in many cases. For example, like healthcare and technology's role in that, and we're at this really transitional phase right now. I think really as a product of the pandemic, where the shape of healthcare is being changed, it's being reshaped, and we're, as consumers, we have like smartwatches and a lot of other tools that we can use to closely monitor our health and give that information to our doctors. But in any case, another curve is really this S curve of adoption. And that's really when we're forecasting emerging markets, this is one of the things that we look at and we think about, and we reference consumer data in terms of awareness, interest, purchase intent, ownership, use, and so forth. But we see this S curve, and you're right, like the early adopters, and then you have some kind of an inflection point that can be some form of innovation, that can be more competitors jumping in, but that really pushes that towards the upper side of the S. And then of course you have that more mature phase and decline. And lastly, I would say another curve that's interesting when we think about tech trends, and like I said, they evolve over a long time series, is also how they can devolve, or we would talk about obsolescence. And so what's really interesting is another shape of curve is U-shaped, and that is tracking the percent of consumers that say they will never buy a technology. And I'll give you a really good example. Digital cameras. Back in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of consumers said they would never buy a digital camera. Why? Because they had a perfectly good film camera, and maybe a few of them. And then over time, we know the story, and then that number came down. But then in more recent years, really tracking back to around 2007, 2008, when we had more smartphones come on the scene, including the iPhone, that number started to tick back up again. Why? Well, because the imaging systems in smartphones, we know that story. Now there's just hardly any reason. So we see this U-shape in turn alongside the S curve of adoption. So there are a lot of curves, there are a lot of measuring sticks, but that's some perspective there.
So let me just follow up. So I work with Kodak when everybody used to buy a little Kodak camera, you know. So do you work with industry with the curve? So will a Kodak call you that does cameras, or will another tech company call you and say, you know, what's your projections for how consumers will purchase a product? Do you have an interaction with the people who produce them themselves, products themselves?
Absolutely, and we do that most often with our industry forecast. So we actually talk to the brands that are making these products in most cases, and capture their perspective. Sometimes it's quantitative, sometimes it's qualitative. But absolutely, we interface with our members. A lot of our research is democratized across our membership constituency, meaning it's everything we produce is available to everyone. It's not relevant to everyone. We definitely don't do any custom work for, say, a single brand. but we definitely get, pardon me, a lot of questions about industry forecasts. People want to know, okay, what were your assumptions thereof, and what if we made a different set of assumptions? What would that look like? And so, yeah, we work with our members on a week in, week out basis on a lot of these things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Llewellyn?
I'm very interested in the initial reaction, the conservatism that people have to new products, which is often, but not always, swept away. I mean, the electronic readers are an example where people thought, no, I love books. I've always loved books. I will not. I'm one of those, except I carry a Kindle with me absolutely everywhere because it is such an efficient way of reading so much more. No time is wasted. I found myself buying books based on whether I could get them into my pocket rather than what they were about. Well, obviously the Kindle has solved that. So that's an interesting situation. But also consumers do feel a little bit at the mercy of technology. Take, for example, fintech. Our banking system has been changed and the consumer side has been changed without any regard to the consumer. I mean, I quite like getting my statement by mail. Now I'm not allowed to get it by mail. I have to get it on. This is an imperious approach by the banks, which I think is unfounded. And also they send me contracts, unilateral contracts. I always thought a contract was negotiated between two parties, not unilaterally handed by one to the other. This is how you will behave. However, this is the imperial side of the time we live in, where we are told what we're going to love, and because there's nothing else, sometimes we come to love it. I don't know if you still had a film camera, but I know that you can't buy a film in every little store where you used to be able to buy it. So in a way, people were driven, as well as maybe taking to the instant aspect of digital cameras and their cell phones. I wonder, do you take a look at the social impact of new technologies? How, for example, working at home may change the dating habits for young people? Many romances started at the office schooler or in the office somewhere. Now, if you don't go to the office, that option is closed out, but the desire to mate is not closed down. So I assume that some other way of meeting has to be devised, possibly electronic. And maybe we have to meet everybody, or will have to, if you're young, which is not me, by computer. But God help the person who isn't computer skilled. Likewise, with the financial imperative, you can't use cash anymore, which is very painful to people who don't have credit cards. They are relegated to a subhuman status in our society. You can't buy an airline ticket. You can't check into a hotel. You can't use a ride-sharing service. Do you have in your vast and so successful organization a compassion department for the damage as well as for the glory of your achievements?
Well, I would say a lot of what you're talking about there, some of these cultural shifts, that's not really the domain of our study. We're looking at really more behavior when it comes to consumer behavior, the use and utility.
You're looking at consumer behavior, or you don't care?
Well, it's really just the domain of a trade association, frankly. A lot of what you're talking about is more the domain of sociologists, behavioralists, and psychologists, and we just don't have, frankly, we just don't have the time to go there. Now, what I will say is that we do look at, we tread lightly in that area, and it's usually in a business context. A lot of what you're talking about, the online statements and so forth, it's multifactorial. I wouldn't say that it's 100% because of tech. These are, when you get down to brass tacks, I think a lot of these things are business decisions. And frankly, a lot of those business decisions are predicated on the demands of customers. So it may be that the preponderance of customers prefer to have online statements, and this is why maybe they charge you if you want to continue, because a lot of these companies are for profit. They have a responsibility to increase shareholder value and equity. And a lot of them, we say at CTA, every company is a tech company. Companies are very focused on leveraging technology to improve their services, profitability, efficiency. And consumers like to use technology for these things too. Now, that being said, it's definitely not a one size fit all, but we do look at some of the shifts in business. Again, we're a trade association. So we're looking at the impact on commerce, economy as a result of innovation. And one big takeaway that has happened and we predict will increase in its trajectory is the interplay between hardware and services. We know that a lot of technology today is software defined. And we also know that it's not really a good idea just to bring out a single device. You want to have a service attached to that for recurring revenue. Recurring revenue models have become very important in industry. They're not uniform by any stretch, but this is just another thing. But the importance of services, that was amplified during the pandemic. And we've tracked a lot of stickiness with services. So that's one of these kinds of, well, and one of the cultural shifts that you're starting to speak about, that instead of really consumers leaning in on more hardware, they're starting to really pivot to more services, adopt more services, and those services are empowered by technology. And that's really across from buying groceries online and having them delivered to your home. That was necessary. And services like Grubhub, those services were necessary in the season of the pandemic. People adopted them that had never used them before. And a lot of them have said, this is a better way. I rather like picking my groceries in an app and they're delivered to my home. And that way I don't have to push around a shopping cart and battle it out with other people for a parking space on Saturday morning. I've got better things to do. So right. Innovation is definitely changing culture. Hybrid work, this is another area. We see a lot of innovation, tying back to Johnny's comments at the top of the call with this reshape of the workplace. It's a real thing. Businesses are trying to figure this out. And there's a lot of innovation taking place both on the hardware and the services side that will enter in. Not all of it will stick, and certainly not all of it is perfect, but a lot of options. I've always said consumers and even businesses, they endorse options, but they abhor complexity. Let me choose, but I don't want anything to be hard. Nobody said, I want that to be harder. No one said that. So
I think let me comment maybe and ask you in another way. I think what we're saying is that this generation of technology is doing away with the generation effect. For example, my generation say, if you were alive 40 years ago, you would say that, and I was 18, and somebody would project, well, this generation, the baby boomers, would not drink coffee anymore. They're going to drink sodas. So therefore, you invest in sodas. Therefore, if I want to start a book company, I go to a college town. I think what you're saying is that the intergeneration effect, which we've seen in technology, right, is almost being erased. So I was a geek when I was 12, and I'm a geek now, in the 70s, right? So I think that my question is, do you look at, I'm going to ask Llewellyn's question a different way. Do you look at generational effects and how the generations might determine whether it's gaming, right, or whether it's how we shop or how we use technology? Do you look at generation effect as one generation comes alive with their money and the next generation comes alive? We call them cohorts in sociology. They give them names,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we look at generational and different age cohorts. We look at a lot of demographics, frankly, through the lens of our consumer research. Households with children versus those with not. Right. And income, all the usual suspects in demographics. But you're exactly right. There are definitely there are trends that are very clearly defined across different generational cohorts. And then there are others that are more democratized. And interestingly enough, gaming has become one of those trends that is not what you might think really locked up with people under the age of 30 or maybe even at the age of under 20. That's not true. In fact, we just finished what we call a future of gaming study. And what we found was surprising very quickly. The last time we did this research was in 2019. And so we just released our 2022 future of gaming study. As I mentioned, we figured in that study, we estimate we've added 9 million gamers in the US market, and the total self-described gamer population in the US today is 164 million people between the ages of 13 and 64. That's 73% of the US population right now.
Wow.
So gaming, and so why is this? Why has this happened? Well, the reasons that people game, the old reasons of escapism, entertainment, competition, achievement, all those things, yes. The new thing is connection. And this is foreshadowing metaverse and people gathering in these virtualized spaces, even at two-dimensional as they are at present day. But they're going online and gaming, and that is really a construct for socialization, which is very interesting and is another one of these things, pointing back to Llewellyn's comments about cultural shifts that we identify in some of our research. We don't really lean into that and try to deep dive and do focus groups and understand exactly the psychology of this. But the other dynamic that's happening in gaming because of this is that people are spending more time gaming. Now, it's not surprising that mobile is the #1 gaming platform, and free-to-play games are the most popular. And you see what Netflix is doing with their adding to their portfolio. They just bought a new game studio, I think, earlier this week, or at least the news broke on that. So people in 2019 spent an average of 16 hours a week playing games. What is it today? Today, it's a full day, 24 hours a week. That's the average across the gaming population. Of course, hardcore gamers, they're staying up until 2 or 3 in the morning every night playing games. But for the rest of us that have to get up and work in the morning, but we're gaming a lot too. And the point is all these little in-between moments that we're pulling out our phones and, doing our thing, and adds up to a lot of time. But we're also connecting with people online and sharing these things. And that's a really interesting finding.
I think gaming has replaced movies in revenue. Long time.
It's very big in entertainment. That's why Hollywood. I'm actually flying out Friday morning to LA. I'm speaking at the Infinity Film Festival there, and gaming is a big topic. What has changed is if I were a hardcore modeler when I was young, putting model cars together that I like to do, by the time I'm 65, if I'm hardcore, I'm still putting them together, right? You're not in the closet, right? And what you're saying is gaming does not go in the closet anymore from an intergenerational point, but it expands the generation. So you won't have a generation with a whole closet full of old games. You have a generation that adopts to the new game as they move on. Yeah.
Steve, let me jump in here.
Sure.
So I want to change tunes a little bit. I would imagine that your organization in CES is sort of the first place where a lot of trends manifest themselves. And I'm curious if you could comment on how do you go about recognizing that. I love the fact that, last year, you had, the precision agriculture pavilion was gigantic. The smart cities pavilion was gigantic. The new drone pavilion was gigantic. I mean, there's all these things that are coming at you. How do you all discover these new trends, the gig economy, on and on and on? They're always manifesting themselves at CES first, I would assume. Am I correct in inferring that? And how do you go about picking these things?
Well, as much as I'd love to tell you guys in the audience that we reside in this ivory tower and we hand down these technology papal bulls, we listen a lot to our members, frankly, and a lot of this comes from our constituency. And in our heart of hearts, our trade association, yes, we're about policy advocacy, we're about commerce, but we're also a lot about networking. And not just member to member, but also members to us. And so when it comes to identifying new emerging trends, you're absolutely spot on. You'll see that a lot of times you'll see these first. And what I said before about every company being a tech company, this is another mechanism that has helped us identify some of these emerging trends like ag tech, food tech, beauty tech with CPG brands like L'Oreal and P&G that are speaking and exhibiting at CES, and they're bringing forward technology. Okay, this is it. So really what we're starting to see just more and more is technology, just kind of like if you think about the Sherwin-Williams paint logo, cover the earth. This is what technology is doing. It's really just, it's no longer ingrained. We used to say, oh, all this stuff started with the military. And then it would go down to business. And then maybe if we were lucky as consumers, we'd get to play with it. Well, that's just not true anymore. And it's just consumer technology and technology in general just underpins more of what we're doing personally and professionally every day.
How much of what you do as an organization and as an association has to do with putting together strange fellows to break new ceilings? How does that come about? Give us an example.
Well, yeah, I mean, partnerships are another aspect of CES that can create some surprise moments, and I'll think quickly. But a lot of partnerships develop from that, and it may not be what you think. Smart cities is a great, I think, example where you might see some surprising public-private partnerships develop. And I think you guys are tracking a number of those things that are happening. I think in some of the notes that were circulated prior to the webinar today, there was, I think, Telstra and Ericsson were working with a co-op in Australia. And so a lot of these public and private enterprises, coming together and working. And a lot of these announcements come out of CES, and CES is a fertile ground for those, really for the genesis of those partnerships, because they're both there and they start talking, and really good things can happen.
How much real quick, and we'll go to Ellen next. How much is the balance of the international voice driving innovation versus the United States or Germany or Japan or Korea? How much innovation is coming out of Africa? How much innovation is coming out of places you wouldn't think of?
Well, more and more technology trends are not localized to one region or country. They tend to be global. And the same is true for innovation. Now, yes, it probably doesn't surprise anyone that there's more technology innovation coming out of Europe, say Western Europe and the United States, than say Africa. But that's not to say that there's no innovation coming out of Africa. Of course there is. And this is really part and parcel of what I said before. Technology is underpinning everything that we're doing. And every country, and this is why we have a strong contingent of government ministers and other officials attend CES, because they want to come and they want to see the latest and greatest technologies. And they take that back to their home country and say, okay, this is what we need to do. These are some companies that can help us, and off you go. So that's really, I think, what we see. And there's just innovation and exhibitors and attendees from 150 countries worldwide at CES. It's not just China, it's not just Western Europe or the US, Latin America. And in fact, we have one of the best ways and most interesting ways to experience what I'm talking about is when you come to CES, if you go to Eureka Park, which is 100% tech startups. This is over at the Venetian Hall. And you go in there, and some countries will have country pavilions. And I'm delighted to say that we will, even in these times and what's going on, we're going to have a contingent from Ukraine. Ukraine innovators coming over, showing off what they're doing, startup companies from Ukraine. Really neat to see. So even in the most challenging circumstances,
Mhm.
Technology innovations happening, commerce is happening, et cetera.
Absolutely.
Steve, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. The first one is, what are the problems you are facing? Do you have supply chain problems? Do you have talented help problems? Are you inhibited by anything government is doing?
Great question. And we have annual study that we do with our members. So in other words, our member companies are the sample. And we call this the future of work. And this explores a lot of those themes around labor, supply chain, and just different business matters pertinent to the tech industry and just operational things. And yes, talent is skilled labor is getting, we know it's an already tight labor market, but skilled labor even tighter. And especially in big markets like DC, for example, a lot of these skilled people can get big, and probably the same is true in Austin, I would say. But yes, supply chain, we're starting to see some of that ease a bit. You mentioned the COVID lockdowns. That's definitely still a point of friction, and which is why our members tell us a lot of them, really for the past 2 to 3 years, have been working on ways to get out of China, because it's just no longer a fit for many companies. And yes, there's no shortage of companies still manufacturing there, but that's another thing we're tracking. To the extent we'll see a lot of reshoring of tech manufacturing remains to be seen. But also chip shortage. This is another area where we're seeing some relief, with the exception being automotive. That's still a very challenged environment, but a lot of that has to do with the nature of the chips in question. They tend to be older chips, and a lot of the semi-fabs, they don't want to make those anymore. They want to make the latest ICs using the smallest possible feature sizes that carry the highest profitability. So they don't want to make the chip that was developed in 1995 anymore. It's just not profitable.
With the sort of cutting edge of globalization was in textiles, because of the labor content of textiles. But as textiles moved out of China, they found willing homes in Bangladesh, Vietnam, you name it, around the globe. What are the places that are going to be creating the technological devices outside of China? Where is the new shoring going to be? Is it going to come back to America? Are we going to be making game consoles in the US? Or is it going to go to some other part of the world? And has that movement begun?
Yeah, well, I think generally speaking, industry has learned its lessons not to have all its eggs in the Chinese basket. And so I think you're going to see, China's quite keen to keep that for a range of reasons. One is for social stability. They want all their people working, idle hands do the devil's work, as they used to say. But
not they play games now.
Yeah. So Vietnam, Southeast Asia, Malaysia, some of these countries are beneficiaries of some of the exodus, if I can use that word, out of China. But also, like I said, there is some reshoring going on, and maybe this isn't with the big brands, but it's with some of the SMEs. Where this has made it, and the general theme is what brands and industries trying to do is to really shorten the supply chain. And with new digital tools, they have visibility up and down that supply chain, or put another way, that value chain. And this has become crucially important, but they're looking to shorten that. And so, for example, you may be manufacturing or sourcing components, say, from a few different places, including China. Those are all brought together in Mexico and then shipped up I-35, I would guess. So, that's an example, but in Europe as well. And countries are, in many cases, incentivizing. Why? Well, because it supports their economy. It supports jobs. Politicians love this. Yeah, let's build that factory in Ohio, TSMC. Let's do it. Intel. They say Columbus is the kind of the new Silicon Valley of the East, and so forth. So a lot is happening domestically. It's not just moving from one place to another. I think it's mostly coming out of China, some staying there for a range of reasons, but then it's just really being distributed around. And a lot of countries are saying, hey, bring it. Just like the state of Texas has played their cards really well. I heard Twitter may move to
Yeah.
Austin for tax reasons, because why? It's jobs. And
Right.
that's what you want.
So Steve, I would imagine that, or maybe tell us, did Zuckerberg bet right by changing the name of the company to Meta? Is the metaverse going to happen? Is Web 3.0 going to totally transform the universe? How long do you think it will take? What's your thoughts?
Well, definitely the renaming of the company to Meta is on trend. Now, whether it was a good move or not, but it definitely puts their name really right in the center of that metaverse trend. CES is going to have a lot of perspective to offer around Web3 and by extension metaverse. And what that looks like is in two places, I think, use cases and basically what is the strategy? What is the strategy around a lot of this stuff? But Web3 involves a lot. There's a lot to unpack and would include new things, new forms of ownership like NFTs, crypto, blockchain, a lot of this. And then you have these shared immersive experiences we would describe as metaverse. And so the use cases that we're hopeful to learn about and we'll actually get to experience at CES are, yes, of course, entertainment. That's the lowest hanging fruit for these shared, and that the gaming market that we were talking about before, they're the natives of that type, and and according to our research, they're asking for that. They're like, yes, give it. Not a lot of other consumers or businesses are asking for shared immersive experiences. Like what? But there are other applications like digital twin when it comes to commercial and industrial applications that are quite interesting and have some real financial benefits to companies. If you're a Boeing or an Airbus and you're designing a new aircraft, the old way was you might have to do some fabrication and so forth, and you're using this big hangar and you're spending a lot of money tooling and doing things. Well, in a digital twin metaverse environment, you've got this virtualized thing, and engineers through software can introduce all kinds of different physics in that environment. So that's a trend where engineering and this thing is moving in this more virtualized space. And then if it all works out and the actuaries and the accountants say, okay, we can make a profit on this, then it goes into production.
Right.
And the strategy for a lot of this in Web3, I think, revolves around in the at least what we know now. In the enterprise space, it's simulation and collaboration. Simulation and collaboration. I mentioned digital twin, collaboration, thinking about hybrid work and what are some other ways, collaborative ways that we could work in this shared immersive experience. And again, for consumers, it's probably around connection, competition, socialization, these kinds of things.
Yeah, well, Steve, let's talk about not so much about Boeing. Let's talk about the backbone of America's small business. And my question is, do you see, it started out where we could have small enterprises and then somebody could come in and do payroll, or what we call the back end of the enterprise. Do you see an emergence, a systematic emergence of back end that would help small enterprises survive? That means if I have a flower shop, if I have another small shop, malt shop, I have a coffee shop, which I think they're re-emerging. I must be on the technology trend in terms of advertising and et cetera to compete. And for example, what CMG could do, and what I'd like for us to do, and I think we're going to move toward that, is to just be the back end for all of small enterprises so that they can get, they certainly could afford all of the algorithms to do with advertising. But if I have a coffee shop, how do I write the algorithms? Well, I get somebody to do it. Usually I might pay someone to come in and do it, but it's changing so much. So my question is, what's the relationship between what you do at CTA and all of the back end that's coming to help companies compete?
Well, some of those back end companies, a lot of them services, some of those are CTA members.
Okay.
Not all, but that's, so our constituency is not just people who make hardware, but also retailers, distributors, really all the stakeholders up and down the value chain, including software makers like Microsoft as a big example, but other service providers and so forth. And what you're talking about is true. I think that we've long had different services that have helped SMEs, because thinking about entrepreneurs, they know their space and they created this product, and they're not an accountant and they're not great with payroll. And so there's lots of outsourcing. That's been a thing for a long time. We were going to outsource this, we're going to outsource this, but there are more and more, there are digital tools, and thinking about the labor market and hiring. And if you're trying to hire a bunch of people, and what am I going to do? Stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning going through all these resumes and so forth? Well, there are tools using AI and natural language processing as one example that can help weed through that and shorten that stack down to maybe just 5 or 6. And these are not the domain of big, huge multinational corporations anymore. And that a lot of these tools have become democratized and are being utilized. And more we talk about a new suite of what we describe as, and this is really stemming from a lot of our work with thematic indexes and ETF partners with NASDAQ, is a new set of digital utilities, which includes AI, robotics, cloud, and of course, cyber. So, and here again, advanced cybersecurity protection is no longer the domain of just big, huge multinational corporations. Small businesses can be protected. Right. And then a final comment is just also 5G is really starting to change the name of the game, and robust connectivity, which will open up a lot of new pathways for innovation and competition. That's really good to see. As you guys probably know, 3GPP, the global standards body for wireless, they just recently published release 17, which is essentially like the starting blocks for industrial IoT, which is to say automation, smart factories, smart hospitals. And that's really just the beginning, because the next step is, in brackets, is 5G advanced, which is going to bring a lot of the protocols and provisions for XR applications. And so 5G and AI are really underpin innovation in this decade. And those two things are going to empower a lot of new tools and technologies to help SMEs. It's not just for big business.
Ha, Llewellyn, did you hear that?
I hear it. Why do you think I'm not interested in big business just because I operate a small business? However, I have a question which you almost touched on, and that is, what about the infrastructure on which all of this is built, which includes obviously broadband, the impact of 5G, the availability of sufficient electricity, what measures companies should take to protect their electricity supply. We've done some very frightening numbers on this program of the demands being put on the electric system at a time when it's not clear they can be met at all, and other infrastructural things that might affect the progress to the technological nirvana.
Well, there are a lot of technologies, I think, working in many ways in concert that are coming together that are going to reinvigorate the economy. And this is across the board. And I do want to mention, by the way, that at CTA, we have a membership division. That's kind of how we divide and compartmentalize our constituency into different divisions and working groups. We have a small business, a small technology business division. So that is all about small businesses. And that's probably one of our most active groups, because they're all scrappy entrepreneurs that are looking to scale in different ways and so forth. And again, the good news is that there are a lot of technologies that are working together. We talked about 5G. That's only going to grow in importance. Smart grid, I mean, that's another aspect of CES. When you come to CES, the smart grid is definitely a topic. And I agree with you, Llewellyn, that's crucial that we not only get our hands on the distribution, power generation, distribution, and also securing that network. It's mission critical to the economy. And hopefully you convince the folks in Austin that maybe they need to join the national grid or something like that. We don't want to divert onto that topic, but also things like robotics are introducing new opportunities and ways to overcome real world challenges, especially for small business like labor. If you're manufacturing product, you have a warehouse, you just built a brand new warehouse, and it takes 200 people to run, or let's say 300 people to run it. It's a big warehouse. Well, and you can only hire 200. Well, what are you going to do? Are you just going to cordon off a third of it and say, well, that's just wasted space. Maybe one day we'll be able to hire. Well, probably not. And so this is like, for example, robotics coming in to help automation. And like I said before, with industrial IoT and the developments on the 5G front, that's the enabling technology with private 5G networks and all the benefits of 5G, along with robotics, along with AI, along with sensors. We're going to witness a reshaping of the economy. And by the way, we haven't talked about this yet, but inflation, there are two ways our nation is ostensibly being crippled by inflation right now. And certainly anybody trying to buy a house is crippled with rising mortgage rates. But, and we know what the Fed did today. We can talk about that. But there's two ways to beat inflation. One is to raise interest rates, which Chairman Powell is really, really good at. We've had six rate rises this year, 4 of them 75 basis points, 4 in a row. Now on that note, but the second way is to boost productivity, and that's what I've been talking about for the past 5 minutes. Is ways that we boost productivity. That's how we pull out of this economic slump, and it's happened before. Importantly, it's happened before. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. Remember, crucially, smartphone penetration was like maybe 30% of households at that time. The iPhone was introduced in 2007. But what happened in 2010? The 4G LTE network, which introduced mobile broadband, was turned on. And that unleashed a wave of innovation and gave rise to 150, 200 companies that are now valued in the billions of dollars. So we saw altogether new products, like in 2011, Apple introduced the iPad as another example, not to just carry on the Apple theme, but it's a convenient example. So we've seen this before, and now it's 5G's turn. Back then, that innovation was focused on the consumer. Now it's focused on the enterprise. As I said, with industrial IoT, there's going to be a reshaping, and it's going to be smart hospitals, smart factories, smart farm. All this stuff's going to happen before the end of the decade.
And so what lag do you see there between the technology sitting on the shelf and the lag? And it went up to what, 0.7% today, I think it was?
Yeah, 0.75, the fourth consecutive.
0.75, right.
Of course, this thing isn't, we can't, I wish we could snap our fingers and make it all better. But this is another reason to come to CES and see the kind of technology innovation. John Deere was mentioned before, and they're going to have a fully autonomous tractor. So these technology tools are there. Sure, it's going to take a little bit of time. It's also going to take time for the network to build out, 5G network to build out. But I would definitely say that the pace of innovation is increasing more than it is, pulling back, or we're seeing less. The economist, British economist Christopher Freeman, he noted that in periods of economic downturn, we tend to see a explosion of innovation, and then as that innovation is unleashed on the economy, that's what levels up business opportunities and the economy overall, and really levels up society, all whole new things. And like I said before, we've seen this before. Technology has a proven track record here in kind of repairing or restoring the economy back from the Great Recession. That was consumer. Now it's enterprise, and that's where we need it most. That's really where we need it most, with things like labor shortage, companies aren't able to maximize their full potential because they can't hire enough workers.
Yep.
So robotics and robots used to be a dirty word. We used to constantly push back on the snarky media or whoever it was saying, oh, robots are a job killer. You want to come in and steal American jobs and so forth. That tune has changed. Now they're like, bring on the robots because I can't hire people. And there's a safety play there that lowers risk, lower insurance premiums in the warehouse because you've got these automated systems and you don't have people climbing up a ladder or doing other things. There are manifold benefits, and this is all going to take shape over the next couple of years, and it's just going to increase. So kind of coming back to curves,
Yes.
I think we're rapidly approaching an inflection point that will probably be the second part of this decade.
Yeah, I think that was Schumpeter, the great Austrian economist who created destructive. But let me ask you this. The president of the United States said today that people have made too much profit. Now, profit to me is not profit in the accounting sense. It's profit to survive what you're talking about.
Yeah.
See, people don't understand that profit is a cost. It's a cost for surviving creative destruction.
Yeah.
So when you say that they're going to build an automatic tractor where we can go and do fields and et cetera, that costs. So when companies have a lot of profit, that means that the profit is a cost to survive and create other products. It's not necessarily profit to be taxed by the country. So I think if you read people like Schumpeter, where he said that, look, in the traditional sense of the accountant's word, profit is a cost. It is not something that is stolen from the worker. It's the cost of surviving the future. So I think one of the things that we need to talk about, as we go through all of these creative, innovative ideas, is if an old typewriter company did not have the profit to invest in computers, they're dead. If John Deere did not have the profits to invest in automated tractors, they're dead. So we need to change. How do we change what profit is? For Marx, profit was something that was stolen. When you turn to Schumpeter, profit is secures jobs in the future for reinvestments.
Exactly. Reinvestment, and then also making good and returning and improving shareholder equity.
Well, I want to be eaten up by my colleague, Llewellyn King, because I saw him frowning. His face was going all kinds of ways. As I was describing the reality of the world, he was taking me back to
whether Johnny will be so happy about profit and automation when we have a machine singing the song and a machine praising profit, which is part of his religion. We don't want him doing all his obsequience here in front of us. We just want him sitting in the counting house by himself. However, I would like to ask you, you mentioned several times that it is a trade association, and let's say trade associations, normally their primary function is to lobby. What are you lobbying the government for these days?
Well, simply put, more responsible tech policy. We're in favor of industry sorting out issues versus heavy-handed regulation. We're not saying that all regulation is bad. In fact, a lot of times it's helpful, but the right amount to establish some guardrails and not really dictate to industry that you can do this, because it is a free market economy. And we want to give and preserve America's ability to innovate. And if simply put, I think if we want America to continue to lead the technology innovation charge and not cede that position to the likes of China, we need to foster in this country an environment that champions technology innovation and doesn't stifle it.
Are you trying to say we need to make America, Texas great? Is that what you're saying?
Amen. Amen. Yeah.
I just thought
and I am, by the way, a native Texan, so I get it.
So quick last question from the audience here. What is the potential of new market in the design of distributed work centers, maybe telemedicine, maybe distant education? What do you see there?
Well, definitely those pieces are moving. I'll address the latter first. Healthcare, the shape of healthcare is changing. And in fact, McKinsey published a more futurist type article a couple months ago, and one of those chapters was on the future of healthcare. And they predicted that in the next decade, it will be rare for us to actually physically meet with our physicians and our primary care physician mostly. But a lot of these interactions, we will have a set of tools and other things that we will be able to do in a televisit type call. And the only time we'll actually physically see a doctor is if we're really, really sick, or if we're going to the emergency room.
Right.
And for hybrid work, yes. I mean, I think everybody would agree with me that ship has sailed. There's still a lot of questions. The Wall Street Journal has really wrote about this extensively, but companies, it's incumbent upon them. They have to figure out what works for their culture. Personally, I think that 100% remote workforce is a fast lane or expressway to a soulless organization where relationships are only screen deep. And I don't think a lot of CEOs want to foster an environment like that because there's no stickiness, there's no loyalty.
Yeah.
You've never met your colleagues in person, and then also, how do you mentor people? How effective can we be? We don't know. We're figuring it out, but hybrid work is definitely that middle ground that I think represents the future.
Yeah.
Steve, I saw my office hour lines as a professor go from being wrapped around the building to zero when email came in. Now my students, ex-students will write and say, Dr. Butler, you remember me, can you please pull it up? I'm applying for med school or law school or an MBA program, and write me a letter of recommendation. They don't even expect any kind of human interaction. So I think that ship sailed a long time ago when it came to managing companies with email. I did a lot of consulting with companies where the CEO used to have all of the information. All of a sudden, you could spread the information in one tap through email. So we are adjusting as we go along.
So Steve, last comments here. We gotta close up, unfortunately, but one of my favorite things when I go to CES is when I go to I forget what you guys call it, is where all the winners of the show are showcased.
Yeah, Innovation Awards.
The Innovation Awards Pavilion. It is gigantic. And I just love that. How many people are involved in choosing this?
Well, we have a panel of industry folk, a lot of them journalists, that are the judges for that. CTA does not do the judging.
Right.
Yeah, we don't do the
It's
judging.
a gigantic endeavor. I mean, it's just brilliant. The detail and the presentation and the innovation and all the gadgets and products, and it's just amazing. If you've never been, everybody should experience that. It's quite incredible. Last thing, Steve, what keeps you up at night between now and January 5th?
Planning all my activities and obligations at CES. Frankly, I'm on the hook for a lot of stuff, including VIP tours. So maybe we could arrange something for you guys if you're going to join us. But yeah, between the speaking and the tour guide responsibilities and a host of other things, yeah, it's a lot. CTA,
Can we expect any jetpacks? Are there any jetpack companies coming? I'm in the market for a jetpack.
Well, you'll have to wait on the jetpack, but definitely you could take an air taxi, the electronic vertical or electric vertical takeoff and landing craft. Those will be there in West Hall, which is shiny and brand new.
Wow.
Huge, but that's where all the transportation is going to be.
There you go, Llewellyn.
Yeah, all the transportation will be there. And by the way, it's January 5th through 8th. We're expecting 100,000 trade professionals from around the world. And
I will be there.
Have close to 2,000 exhibitors.
I will be there. I'm bringing some of my crew with me.
Okay, we'll see you there.
Final thoughts, gentlemen?
Absolutely wonderful discussion. Keep up the good work, bringing people together.
Articulate, yes, we've had on this program. You really are extraordinarily good at explaining things. I hardly had chance to puncture your arguments.
Well, much respect, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. John, take us away, please.
Okay. I'm going down to the Greyhound station. Gonna buy a ticket to ride. I'm gonna find that lady with 2 or 3 kids and sit down by her side. Ride till the sun comes up and down, around about 2 or 3 times. Smoke a cigarette on the back seat. Try out my songs on the people I meet and get along with it all. But where the people say y'all sing a song with a friend, change the shape of it, and get back in the game.
Woo! Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Appreciate you.
Always a pleasure.